Hello there and welcome to today's video, which is all about my experience with alcohol as an AuDHD-er. And for those of you who've been around for a while in the creative autistic community, you may remember I did do a video on alcohol around 18 months ago, but as I've since been diagnosed with ADHD, I think it really is worth coming back to this as a conversation because I can really see now how ADHD really affected my alcohol use. So for those of you who aren't aware, I'm Lizzie and I was diagnosed as autistic almost 2 years ago now, and I was diagnosed with ADHD last year. So I am in essence an AuDHD-er. These days, I do feel like autism is more in charge, certainly since perimenopause, but now I can look back at my life, certainly since my ADHD diagnosis, and really see how much of my adult life was informed by ADHD as well. And it's been such an interesting process to go through this, really. So, as with many ADHD people, I really struggled with a social life throughout all of my life. I was bullied at school, so I didn't have any childhood friends, so I needed to go out and make friends as a young adult. And of course, this was really difficult as an autistic person. I find it really difficult to make friends, and certainly to maintain friendships has been even more difficult for me. So I've just relied on alcohol throughout basically my whole life in order to engage with people socially. And having ADHD, I felt a need to engage with other people and to socialise, but I needed to develop a strategy in order to go out and have fun at times, really. And that strategy was alcohol. And I remember my first drink was, I think when I was around 15, and I immediately thought, wow, what is this? My inhibitions all seemed to just fade away, and I was suddenly able to communicate better. I didn't have the, that voice in my head constantly criticising me. I was suddenly able to talk to other people in the ways that other people seem to be able to. So I soon grabbed hold of alcohol as a socializing tool, and I would use it regularly. And as a young adult, I'd definitely go out every weekend, sometimes during the week as well. And I'd always drink way too much because I just didn't seem to have an off switch. And also, I found the act of drinking like a stim, really, as well, which gave it, another benefit for me. I really loved the physical act of drinking, and particularly longer drinks. And smoking was another stim back then, but that's a story for another time. So when I first started socialising, I used to drink shorts. I think it was kind of either vodka or Bacardi and Coke I'd drink, and I absolutely hated the taste, but it was all about the effects of the alcohol for me, because alcohol for me was a stimulant. I've always been confused by other people when they've described alcohol as a relaxant. It's far from that for me. It would always give me energy basically straight away, and I'd become chatty and have a need to talk actually, which I don't usually. I'm certainly by nature not a chatty person at all, but it would almost encourage my curiosity in other people, really. And of course, alcohol can help us mask as well, can't it, as all autistic people or ADHD people? And it certainly helped me mask. I feel like almost it helped turn me into a different person at times, somebody who was really confident, somebody that could engage in conversation so much easier, to the point where I'd come up with witty retorts really easily, which I find it really difficult to do in real life. So, of course, alcohol became really quite seductive for me. And also, when I was starting to socialise and go out and meet friends, etc., this was back in the 90s when the whole ladette culture started coming around. And I really kind of related to this because I've never been like a girly girl. I hate using that expression if I'm honest, but I found friendships with lads so much easier than women. So I was able to hide myself in this kind of ladette kind of personality, really. Certainly in the earlier years, or my teenage years, it was all about the effects for me. But when I discovered beer in my mid to late 20s, I just loved this drink so much. I was able to finally not only appreciate the effects of alcohol, but really enjoy the drink as well. So I really embraced the whole ladette culture because it was all about, just being yourself, eschewing many ideals about femininity. And, I was all about that really. And I really enjoyed that time in my life in terms of socializing anyway. I think what's interesting about that time now, looking back, is that I've had loads of jobs in my life, which is in essence another consequence of being an ADHD person because I just never felt content in a job. And I'll probably do another video on that at some point. But um, for me, I was often be socializing with people at work. So it almost affected my persona at work as well, if you will, because it's not like I was a big party girl or anything like that, or I was known for being a party girl, but I was known for loving a drink. And of course, I'd be a more confident version of myself when I was out. So I would often feel like I would need to be some kind of version of that in the workplace as well, because it would seem like my personalities would feel too extreme, my drinking self and my work self. So I felt like I needed to ramp up my masking at work as well because I needed to, I don't know, fulfill others' ideas of who I was, if this makes any sense. So it would make the workplace for me even more stressful because I'd have to mask even more, which makes so much sense of why I felt the need to jump around from job to job so often because I would find it utterly exhausting, this constant masking and, really quite extreme masking at times would just send me into burnout really, really easily. Alcohol has many negative consequences, doesn't it? But the one that I want to talk about now is hangovers. I basically had horrendous, horrendous hangovers that would last days sometimes, and I would suffer with low mood. And because I would drink so much while I was out, I would very often have no recollection really of what I'd said to other people. So I would be really panicking the next day as to what on earth I'd said. Had I offended anybody? Had I said anything that was really out of order? I hadn't got a clue, and I don't doubt that I, hadn't said anything to offend other people. But once you get that idea into your head, it's so hard to let it go. And of course, I now recognise that this is a symptom of rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, something that comes so often with being an AuDHD person. And I've really struggled with RSD my entire life, and I do need to do a video on this because I do have a lot to say on RSD. But gosh, it was so apparent during my hangovers because I would just feel dreadful because I thought I'd be ostracised in some way, and that panic wouldn't settle until I'd seen the people that I was socializing with again, or texted them, or something like that, some contact with them, to know that everything was okay. I hadn't said anything wrong. But I could never tell my brain that. I could never say, it's fine, you haven't said anything to offend anybody. My brain would just conjure up all of these horrible negative scenarios, and I just couldn't calm it at all. And also the physical consequences of drinking as well. I would just feel physically awful. I'd have this kind of, it's really difficult to describe, but I once heard somebody say that they felt really thin-blooded after drinking the night before, and I just really like this description. It really is, well, a good descriptor of how I felt. Certainly for the next few days after drinking, I just felt like my body was kind of all messed up, and it would take me ages just to feel kind of normal again. And also, I'd be basically having like a sensory meltdown the following day after drinking as well, because all of my sensitivities were really heightened. So when we think about kind of noise sensitivity or light sensitivity, having to deal with other people, just talk to other people, felt impossible, and I'd just hide myself away very often on a Saturday or a Sunday, just hiding under my duvet, perhaps with the TV on very, very quietly, because it's all that I could cope with doing. And also I could only really cope with very easy food as well, something that was really easy to prepare, often junk food. So the whole experience was just never good for me. And I'm sure that many ADHD people will be able to relate to this. Nowadays, I can't drink at all. I have MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. So I'm essentially intolerant to alcohol these days. And it's a double-edged sword for me, because I can appreciate the health benefits of not drinking, but I really miss alcohol. I really miss the escapism that it would bring. And certainly as somebody with ADHD, it's really hard to find techniques to quieten an overly busy brain, isn't it? And alcohol was so useful for me for that. And being a drinker was a massive part of my own personal sense of identity. So when I had to give up drinking through MCAS, it felt like an enormous part of me was missing. And also, as an autistic person, I struggle with alexithymia, as do many autistic and ADHD people. So I find it really hard to identify my own emotions, and very often I'll only be able to recognize them in hindsight, and particularly more kind of joyful experiences. I'm more in tune actually with more negative emotions, but certainly in terms of feeling happy, etc., that tends to come to me a little later on, and I can recognise later that I felt really happy then, but yeah, sadly I rarely experience that in the moment. But with alcohol, it really helps me to tap into my emotions, and very often I'd basically have something going on inside my brain where I felt kind of bothered by something, and I wouldn't be able to identify exactly what that thing was. But eventually I started to notice whenever this would happen, this feeling, I'd essentially have a few drinks at home, maybe a couple of glasses of wine or a few beers, and it would really help me to identify how I was feeling. So I would either be dancing around my flat an hour later, or I'd be sobbing on the floor in tears, because it just really helps me feel those feelings, and feel them really quickly actually. So loved that tool because now I don't have that tool, so it's really difficult for me to identify feelings. And yeah, I feel a lot flatter these days, I have to say. I just really miss alcohol as yeah, that conduit to experiencing more feelings, really. And I hope this makes sense to at least some of you out there. I think the Alexithymia angle really helps to explain why I would use alcohol to both congratulate and commiserate, whether that be myself or other people, because I think it would really help me identify and feel the feelings that were appropriate for the events. So since my autism and ADHD diagnoses, or being an AuDHD person, it just has helped to explain so much about my life, really. I would often wonder why I would rely on binge drinking so much, why I would always have to have a drink with me if I went to somebody's house. You know, I could never just sit and have a coffee with them. I would always bring alcohol with me. And basically, any social event that I can remember, I would always have to have a drink. And it just makes so much sense now. And particularly now that I know I have ADHD, I was using it to self-medicate in many ways. I was using it to quieten this overly busy brain that I have. And it just explains so much, and it helps you, I think, to be kinder to yourself, or kinder to your younger self, because I just used to beat myself up about everything, basically, how I just couldn't live a normal life when compared to other people that I knew, why I was so different, why I struggled so much. There was a reason for all of it. I'm ADHD. So I'd love to know if you're also an ADHD person and you can relate to some of what I've shared today, perhaps all of what I've shared today, and you've been perhaps overly reliant on alcohol throughout your life as well, because I certainly have been, and perhaps it is a blessing that I can't drink these days, even though I'd love to be able to. So let me know down below. And also, I think many neurodivergent people think, I would love to comment, but I just don't know what to say. So if this sounds like you, I would love it if you could leave me an orange heart down below in comments, because for me, they signify friendship and solidarity and all the things I feel about this community. So yeah, leave me an orange heart. So I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.